Right now, as you hear this, Mars is not the quiet red desert world we've always known. Something has just happened in its orbits, something astronomers never expected to witness in their lifetimes. A vast interstellar traveler, catalogued as 3I Atlas, has made a sudden, unexplained maneuver, brushing past Mars in a way that defies our predictions. It didn't crash. It didn't vanish. But it shifted slightly, unnervingly close enough to rattle every observatory on Earth and ignite whispers that something in our cosmic neighborhood is no longer following the script. And this isn't just another asteroid flyby. This isn't routine cosmic traffic. This is the third confirmed interstellar object in human history, one that has already baffled us with impossible chemistry, alien origins, and behavior no comet should ever display. But the move it just made beside Mars, that's something altogether different. To understand why this moment is so terrifying, you first need to know what 3I Atlas is and what makes it unlike anything else we've ever studied. In July 2025, the Atlas survey team in Chile spotted a faint, moving blur in the night sky. At first, it seemed like just another comet, but the math betrayed its secret. Its orbit wasn't elliptical like ordinary comets. It was hyperbolic, a one-way ticket through our solar system, arriving from another star entirely, destined never to return. That made it the third interstellar visitor ever confirmed after the infamous Oumuamua in 2017 and Borisov in 2019. Only this one didn't just look strange. Its chemistry was alien. Its coma released more carbon dioxide than water vapor, an inversion of everything we expect from comets in our solar system. Its glow was a haunting emerald green, and its metallic emissions hinted at bizarre proportions of nickel without the iron we always see. Put simply, this was no ordinary space rock. Astronomers thought they had time. They thought 3I Atlas would sweep harmlessly past the inner solar system, give us a rare observational gift, and then disappear forever into the dark. They were wrong. When 3I Atlas approached perihelion in late October 2025, it was supposed to slingshot past the sun and fade into the blackness. For weeks, it hid behind solar glare, out of sight but never out of mind. Then, in December, it re-emerged. Everything changed. Its trajectory had shifted. Slightly at first, enough for planetary defense trackers to flag it as unusual. Enough for simulations to run hot with instead of moving on a graceful, predictable arc out of the solar system. 3I Atlas's path bent unnaturally close to Mars, and when it passed beside the red planet, astronomers saw something they weren't prepared for, a subtle deceleration, followed by a course correction that no purely natural body should have made. To the untrained eye, it was nothing, just a cosmic traveler brushing past another world. But to scientists who live and breathe celestial mechanics, the move was a red siren. Because comets don't steer, asteroids don't break, gravity doesn't just glitch. So what did we just witness beside Mars? Mars is no stranger to close encounters with small bodies. Asteroids and comets cross its orbit all the time. In fact, many of our meteorites on Earth actually come from Mars, blasted into space by past impacts. But this isn't one of those. This isn't local. This isn't even from our solar system. 3I Atlas came from the galaxy itself, object that may be older than our sun, formed billions of years ago in some distant star system with conditions wildly different from our own. And now, at this precise moment in human history, it has chosen or been forced to graze past Mars in a way no natural model accounts for. Imagine being an astronomer watching your tracking software in real time. For months, your data matched the predictions. Then suddenly, the numbers break away from every curve you plotted. It's like watching a train follow the tracks, and then, without warning, glide sideways across the gravel. That's what happened with 3I Atlas. And the questions it leaves behind aren't just scientific, they're existential. What force acted on 3I Atlas? Was it outgassing jets of volatile material spraying from its surface, nudging it like thrusters? That happens with comets, but never with the precision we saw here. Was it gravitational, some unseen mass or resonance pulling it slightly off course? But Mars wasn't close enough to account for the maneuver, or was it something else? That's the question rattling through late-night observatories and whispered between planetary defense circles. Is 3I Atlas behaving like something under control? Because if it is, that changes everything. Picture Mars on the night of the encounter, silent dust storms curling across its surface. Our rover's perseverance, curiosity still crawling in the cold twilight, transmitting data back to Earth. Above them, through thin pink skies, 3I Atlas sweeps past. A 5-kilometer nucleus, glowing green, trailing a fractured, chemical tail that doesn't belong here. And then something shifts. Not much, just enough. If this were any other rock, astronomers would write it off as a measurement error. But it's not any other rock. It's the most alien visitor we've ever confirmed. And this tiny move beside Mars may be the first sign that we are not watching a passive object at all. Are we witnessing a natural comet fragmenting under stresses we don't understand? Or are we looking at the first deliberate move of something else? Something that knows exactly what it's doing. Stay with me, because this is only the beginning. In part 2, we'll break down exactly what happened beside Mars, the trajectory, the physics, the failed explanations, and the scenarios, both natural and terrifying, that could explain why 3I Atlas made a move no comet should ever make. When the data first came in, most astronomers didn't believe it. A handful of observatories across Earth had captured the faint glow of 3I Atlas as it skimmed past Mars, and their numbers didn't match the predictions. The object was where it shouldn't have been, traveling at a velocity that didn't make sense. Observers at the European Southern Observatory thought their instruments were misaligned. Teams in Hawaii recalibrated twice, convinced they had introduced a software error. The first reports were filed quietly, almost hesitantly, because no one wanted to be the first to say the unthinkable. The object had slowed down. In celestial mechanics. That word doesn't even belong. Nothing just slows down in space. A body on a hyperbolic orbit has a precise trajectory defined by gravity and its incoming velocity. It doesn't decide to shave off speed near another planet, and it certainly doesn't appear to adjust its course with the precision of a spacecraft executing a maneuver. Yet that was exactly what the raw data suggested. 3I Atlas had not only passed closer to Mars than predicted, but it also shifted into a slightly different trajectory after the encounter, as though some subtle force had acted upon it. The first theory on the table was outgassing. Comets are notorious for developing jets as sunlight heats their frozen surfaces, spraying vaporized material into space like natural thrusters. We've seen this countless times in our own solar system, and it can nudge a comet's path slightly, enough to throw off predictions if astronomers don't account for it. The problem is that outgassing is messy, random, and weak. It can alter a comet's brightness or tilt its spin, but it doesn't produce clean, controlled course corrections. 3I Atlas's maneuver wasn't chaotic. It was elegant, almost surgical. A shift so slight and yet so precise that models couldn't write it off as a natural exhaust plume. Still, scientists pushed the outgassing hypothesis as far as it could stretch. Maybe 3I Atlas's chemistry already strange, with its unusual ratio of carbon dioxide to water vapor produced jets, far stronger than anything we'd seen. Maybe its entire nucleus was riddled with vents, erupting in coordinated bursts that by sheer chance produced the effect of deceleration and a sideways push. But even in the most generous models, the numbers refused to cooperate. For the observed change in trajectory, the object would have had to vent gas at pressures and angles that defied both probability and physics. If not outgassing, then perhaps gravity. Mars has enough pull to nudge passing asteroids slightly, and gravitational assists are common in spaceflight. But in this case, the math was merciless. The red planet wasn't close enough, massive enough, or aligned properly to account for the anomaly. Its tug would have bent 3I Atlas's path by a predictable degree, and astronomers had already accounted for that in their models. The discrepancy wasn't in the direction of Mars's pull, but perpendicular to it, as though the object had shrugged off the red planet's influence and chosen a new vector entirely at this point. The word error was thrown around a lot. Too much noise in the data. Atmospheric distortion from Earth-based telescopes. A statistical blip that would vanish when better instruments got a look. That's what people told themselves, and for a while it calmed the waters, until the Mars orbiters began transmitting. MAVEN, MRO, and even the tiny CubeSats from the HOPE mission all confirmed the same thing. The interstellar visitor had indeed passed where it shouldn't have. The shift was real. The velocity drop was real. And if anyone still doubted it, Perseverance on the Martian surface sealed the case. Its cameras had captured faint streaks in the upper atmosphere as 3I Atlas passed overhead, a green shimmer slicing across the thin skies before fading into the stars. The timing matched perfectly with Earth-based observations, and when triangulated, the results left no room for error. So what happened? Why did the most alien object we've ever observed perform what looked like a controlled maneuver in the vicinity of Mars? Some insisted it was still natural, just beyond our ability to explain. After all, the cosmos has surprised us before. We once thought the idea of geysers on Europa was science fiction, until telescopes proved them real. We thought comets were inert snowballs until spacecraft revealed them as dynamic, active worlds. Maybe 3I Atlas simply represented another category of behavior, something rare but not impossible. That was the conservative stance, and it carried weight. But it didn't stop whispers of something far stranger, because if it wasn't random, then it looked deliberate, like an adjustment. Like navigation. That word navigation spread like a virus in late-night discussions and classified memos. If 3I Atlas had slowed and shifted beside Mars, it suggested awareness. The move had no advantage for a natural traveler, but for something artificial, something controlled, it made perfect sense. Mars isn't just another planet. It's the staging ground of our robotic exploration fleet. It's the world where human missions are being planned, the neighbor we dream of colonizing. If something wanted to make a statement or to observe us from a safe distance, there's no better place to perform a flyby than right beside Mars. Of course, the scientific community recoiled from this. No one wanted to resurrect the ghost of Oumuamua, that first interstellar enigma whose cigar-like shape and unexplained acceleration had already ignited years of debate over whether it was natural or artificial. To raise the same possibility about 3I Atlas would be professional suicide. And yet, behind closed doors, some of the same people who dismissed the idea publicly were running models in private, testing scenarios that they'd never dare put in a paper. The unsettling part was how well those models fit. A small change in thrust at precisely the right moment would produce exactly the shift observed. The energy required wasn't enormous nothing beyond the reach of an advanced spacecraft. And if the object had been traveling for billions of years through interstellar space, it had plenty of time to slow, to conserve, to wait for the right moment. The what-if scenarios multiplied quickly. What if 3I Atlas wasn't just a comet, but some kind of probe, its comet-like appearance nothing more than camouflage? What if it had been coasting silently until now, only revealing its hand when it reached a planet worth observing? And most chillingly, what if its maneuver wasn't for us at all? What if Mars itself was the destination? The red planet is littered with relics of human technology rovers, landers, orbiters, all of them broadcasting signals back to Earth, to an outside intelligence. Those signals would stand out like beacons. The planet we think of as lifeless and silent is, from an electronic perspective, humming with activity, a perfect target for a close pass, a perfect chance to gather intelligence without ever approaching Earth itself. Yet even this idea left unanswered questions. If 3I Atlas was under control, then who or what was controlling it? Its speed, its hyperbolic trajectory, its interstellar origins. These weren't the traits of a machine launched recently. This was something ancient, something that had traveled light years before arriving here. Could it be a relic, a derelict probe from a civilization long gone? Or was it still active, still obeying commands sent from a star system unimaginably far away? The possibilities bordered on science fiction, and yet every alternative explanation fell short. That was the trap. The moment you ruled out errors, the moment you admitted the data was sound, you were left standing at the edge of a cliff with no safe step backward. Either 3I Atlas had revealed a kind of natural behavior no comet had ever displayed, rewriting our understanding of celestial mechanics, or it had just confirmed that we are not alone. On Earth, the official narrative leaned heavily on the natural side. Press releases spoke cautiously of anomalous outgassing, of poorly understood sublimation dynamics, of a need for further study. But in the background, planetary defense agencies began running impact simulations, not because they thought 3I Atlas would hit us, but because they needed to know what would happen if it chose to dot. The numbers were sobering. At 5 kilometers across, its nucleus carried more energy than any impactor in recorded history. A strike on Mars would have been catastrophic for our rovers, a strike on Earth apocalyptic for our species. Even at a safe distance, its gravitational field and chemical emissions could have unexpected consequences. That's why the flyby beside Mars wasn't just a curiosity, was a warning. And if it was a warning, the question remained, from whom? As weeks passed, new data poured in from telescopes, orbiters, and deep space antennas tracking the alien visitor. Spectral readings revealed more of its impossible chemistry. Its coma shimmered with carbon dioxide in ratios no solar system comet had ever shown. Nickel lines glowed with intensity, while iron remained strangely absent. The green hue grew brighter as it passed Mars, like a lantern flaring in the night. Some astronomers saw patterns in the brightness, subtle pulsations that hinted at modulation. Was it just rotational effects, the tumbling of a strange nucleus? Or was it something closer to a signal buried in the flicker of reflected sunlight and gas emissions? No one could agree, but the debate was enough to fuel speculation. Conspiracy forums exploded. Social media lit up. The idea that we had just witnessed a controlled maneuver beside Mars leaped from scientific whispers to public frenzy almost overnight. And yet, for all the noise, one truth remained constant. 3I Atlas had done something it shouldn't have. As 3I Atlas moved past Mars and continued deeper into the inner solar system, the mystery only grew stranger. If the maneuver had raised eyebrows, what came next ignited debates that shook the entire scientific community. Because when astronomers turned their most powerful instruments toward the glowing emerald visitor, they found chemistry that should not exist in any comet. Anywhere, ever. From the ground, its appearance was already unsettling. A ghostly green glow surrounded it, not the pale bluish haze we associate with ordinary comets. The color alone hinted at molecules fluorescing in ways we hadn't seen before. Amateur astronomers noticed it first, snapping photographs through backyard telescopes, posting images online that seemed too surreal to be real. At first, people dismissed it as processing artifacts, tricks of exposure or filters. But when professional observatories confirmed the same luminous green coma, speculation began. What was producing that glow? The James Webb Space Telescope, with its unmatched infrared sensitivity, delivered the first real answers. Its spectrographs dissected the light pouring from 3I Atlas, spreading it into the fingerprints of atoms and molecules. The results were not just unusual, they were impossible. Instead of the typical water-dominated spectra seen in solar system comets, the lines told a different story. Carbon dioxide was everywhere, dominating the emissions in a ratio far higher than anything recorded before. Water, the building block of most comets, was barely present. This visitor wasn't shedding ice like ours, it was breathing out carbon dioxide as if it had been born in a place where water was scarce and CO was the rule, not the exception. To understand why this was shocking, you need to picture how comets form. In our own system, water ice condenses in the outer regions beyond the snow line, a few astronomical units from the sun. That's why comets from the Kuiper Belt and Oort cloud carry so much water frozen into their cores. Carbon dioxide condenses much farther out, in colder, darker realms beyond the orbit of Neptune, where temperatures sink below 80 Kelvin. For CO2 dominates so strongly. 3I Atlas must have been forged in an environment unimaginably frigid, in the distant outskirts of its parent star system, perhaps even farther, perhaps in conditions no human model of planetary formation had ever considered. But that wasn't the only anomaly. The Very Large Telescope in Chile spotted emission lines from nickel, bright and distinct. That in itself was surprising, but what came next defied explanation. The corresponding iron lines were missing, or at least drastically weaker than expected. In our system, the abundance of iron and nickel is tied tightly together, reflecting the solar nebula from which we were born. Wherever you find one, you find the other, in almost perfect lockstep. But not here. 3I Atlas was screaming with nickel and whispering with iron, as though it came from a star system with a chemistry all its own, forged under rules we don't yet understand. Some researchers tried to dismiss this as measurement error, as instrument quirks or background interference. But as independent observatories confirmed the results, the reality sank in. This was no trick. The ratios were real. 3I Atlas wasn't just chemically different, it was chemically alien. A messenger from a system where the building blocks of matter had assembled in ways that challenged every assumption we've ever held about planetary formation. As weeks passed, the strangeness deepened. Its coma showed fluctuations in brightness, flickers that didn't follow the smooth curve of a comet responding to sunlight. Instead, its glow pulsed in erratic bursts, as though new vents were opening and closing in waves across its surface. Some scientists argued this was just rotational behavior, the tumbling of a misshapen nucleus revealing different volatile-rich patches, but others noticed patterns in the fluctuations that seemed too regular, too structured to be random. To some eyes, it almost looked like modulation, the kind of signal that could, in theory, carry information. The word signal was toxic, yet impossible to suppress. Officially, no one dared call it that. Instead, papers spoke cautiously of episodic activity and outburst cycles. But in quiet corners, astrophysicists whispered about something far less comfortable. Could the flickering in 3I Atlas's coma be intentional? Could it be transmitting in ways too subtle for us to fully decode? Even if you strip away that speculation, the raw chemistry itself was staggering enough. A carbon dioxide-dominated body, glowing green, spitting nickel, shunning iron. No one could explain how such an object formed. Some proposed that it originated not from a planetary system like ours, but from the thick disk of the Milky Way. A population of ancient stars formed billions of years before our sun. If that was true, then 3I Atlas wasn't just alien. It was ancient, perhaps older than Earth itself. A fragment of a planetary nursery that had vanished long before our world was even conceived, and that raised even bigger questions. How many of these fragments were drifting between stars, silent witnesses to the birth and death of systems across the galaxy? How many had brushed past our solar system before, unseen in the darkness, leaving no trace? If 3I Atlas carried such bizarre chemistry, what would others carry? What secrets about the universe were locked in these frozen messengers waiting to be read? The thought that haunted many scientists wasn't just that 3I Atlas was strange. It was that it was too perfect. Its trajectory had brought it not just into our solar system, but into ideal observational range, close enough for our most advanced telescopes to dissect, bright enough to ignite interest across the world, almost as if the cosmos had delivered it on purpose, wrapped in alien chemistry, glowing like a beacon, daring us to pay attention. Meanwhile, the object's tail developed complexities no one could account for. Multiple strands of dust and gas arced in different directions, some bending in ways that suggested forces beyond solar radiation pressure. Polarimetric studies revealed dust grains with properties unlike any we'd catalogued, scattering light in patterns that hinted at exotic materials. The deeper scientists looked, the more alien it became. Every instrument revealed another layer of strangeness, another puzzle that refused to fit into the neat boxes of our understanding. And with each discovery, the memory of its move beside Mars grew darker. If this object was natural, then its chemistry spoke of a planetary system unimaginably different from ours. If it was not natural, if its oddities were not random but designed, then we were looking at something else entirely, a probe, a craft, or a relic engineered from elements chosen with purpose. A machine disguised as a comet, carrying the fingerprints of a civilization older than our world. The public fascination exploded. News outlets trumpeted the green glow, the alien chemistry, the possibility that we were looking at the first undeniable artifact of another world. Social media swirled with theories, from interstellar derelicts to beacons announcing themselves beside Mars. The words cosmic message trended worldwide, yet the official voices tried to calm the storm, insisting that the anomalies were just science doing what science does, revealing surprises, forcing us to refine our models. That may have been true, but for those who saw the raw numbers, who traced the fingerprints of nickel without iron and water without dominance, the sense of unease never faded, because if 3i Atlas was truly natural, then our galaxy was more diverse, more chaotic, more alien than we ever dared believe. And if it wasn't natural, if its chemistry was the product of design, then the encounter beside Mars was not an accident. It was the beginning of contact. Either way, the implications were terrifying. Stay with me, because in part 4, we will turn from the chemistry to the history, tracing 3i Atlas back through the galaxy, uncovering its possible origins, and asking the question no one is ready to face. How long has this object been traveling, and what ancient civilization might have sent it our way? Long before it ever brushed past Mars, before it caught the attention of our telescopes, before it was even catalogued as 3i Atlas, this object had already lived a journey spanning billions of years. If you strip away the politics, the panic, and the speculation of the present moment, the simplest question remains the hardest to answer. Where did it come from? Because in that answer lies everything. Was this just a fragment of ancient rock, cast loose by gravity long ago, or was it something more, something that had a purpose before we ever existed? Astronomers began the search for its birthplace the only way they could. By rewinding the clock, they traced its trajectory backward, correcting for planetary pulls, solar tides, and galactic drift. The result was disorienting. The line did not point cleanly to any nearby star system. Instead, it stretched into the thick disk of the Milky Way, into a cloud of possibilities blurred by time. Over the millions of years that 3i Atlas must have been traveling, stars themselves had moved, shifting their positions like dancers on a cosmic stage. The object's path crossed not one or two, but dozens of possible points of origin. It was like trying to trace a single grain of sand back to the exact wave that carried it across an entire ocean. What became clear, however, was its age. For 3i Atlas to arrive here now, at this angle, at this speed, it must have been ejected from its home system at least tens of millions of years ago, perhaps hundreds. Some models pushed even further, suggesting 1 billion years or more. If that was true, then this fragment had been wandering the galaxy since before humanity's ancestors learned to walk upright. It had watched stars burn out, watched others ignite. It had drifted in silence across the void, untouched, until it stumbled into our solar system at exactly this moment in history. And that timing, more than its chemistry, more than its maneuver beside Mars, was what unsettled so many scientists. Because the galaxy is vast, objects like this should pass by only rarely. The fact that it happened now, in the short span of human observation, and that its behavior was so unlike anything else, it all felt too precise, too unlikely. Was this really just chance? Or had something, somewhere, nudged the dice? To explore its origins, astronomers turned to the stars themselves. If 3i Atlas's chemistry was dominated by carbon dioxide, with unusual ratios of nickel to iron, then perhaps it came from a system with very different stellar conditions. Stars of the thick disk, ancient and metal poor, formed long before ours. Their planets would be built from ingredients that diverged wildly from what we know. Perhaps 3I Atlas was born in one of those alien nurseries, shattered in a collision, flung outward by the gravity of a giant planet, and left to wander the galaxy as a frozen relic of another time. But there was another possibility, one that scientists whispered about but rarely published. What if it didn't just drift? What if it was sent? The idea was outrageous, yet it fit too well with the evidence to ignore. A hyperbolic trajectory doesn't rule out design. In fact, it might be exactly what you'd expect from an interstellar probe launched by a civilization long gone. It would conserve energy by drifting across light years, silent and undetectable, until it arrived where it needed to be. Its comet-like appearance would disguise it as natural debris, ensuring that only a species with telescopes and curiosity could recognize its strangeness. And its maneuver beside Mars, that subtle, terrifying move, could have been the moment it revealed itself. If this was true, then the age of 3I Atlas took on a new meaning. It might not just be an ancient rock, but an ancient messenger, launched before our species even existed, with instructions to travel until it encountered intelligence. If so, then our solar system wasn't chosen by coincidence. It was chosen by design. We were always meant to see it. Yet even if you set aside the alien probe theory, the natural scenarios were no less haunting. Imagine a world circling a distant star, an icy planet orbiting on the far edge of its system. Imagine a catastrophic collision, an impact so violent that fragments are hurled into interstellar space. One of those fragments, rich in carbon dioxide and metals, begins a journey it will never end. It drifts through the void, frozen and silent, for hundreds of millions of years. Stars are born and die, galaxies collide. And still it travels, waiting for the day when gravity and timing finally pull it into the orbit of a young, noisy species on a small blue world. That is the naturalist's view. 3I Atlas as a random shard of ancient history, an artifact of blind cosmic chaos. But chaos alone struggles to explain its behavior beside Mars. Random debris does not steer, it does not decelerate. And so, even the most cautious scientists admitted, quietly, that they could not rule out intent. If 3I Atlas had been traveling for millions of years, maybe billions, then the civilization that created it, if any, might not even exist anymore. It could be a relic of ghosts, a message from the dead, drifting long after its makers had vanished. Or worse, it could still be active, still transmitting, still carrying out its mission with a patience so inhuman that we cannot grasp it. The public, of course, didn't care about the subtleties. They wanted answers. Was it alien or not? Was it natural or artificial? Governments, caught between panic and secrecy, offered neither. Instead, they quietly expanded monitoring programs, directed more telescopes at the visitor, and whispered among themselves about what to do if the truth was worse than anyone imagined, because there was another angle to the question of origins, one darker than any of the rest. If 3I Atlas was a probe, then where was it sent from? And more importantly, was it alone? No one wanted to say it aloud, but the thought was impossible to avoid. What if this was not the first? What if objects like this had been passing by for centuries, for millennia, slipping past unnoticed before our telescopes grew strong enough to see them? How many have we missed? How many are out there still, watching? Tracing the origins of 3I, Atlas is like staring into a mirror that reflects not just the past, but our own fragility. If it is natural, It tells us that the galaxy is filled with chaos, that alien chemistry and ancient collisions are far more common than we ever dared believe. If it is artificial, it tells us that we are not alone, and worse, that we are being watched by something with patience beyond comprehension. In both cases, the implications stretch far beyond science. They touch on who we are, where we fit, and whether our first contact with another intelligence has already happened, hidden in plain sight, disguised as a comet. The truth is, we don't know where 3I Atlas came from. Maybe we never will. But what we do know is that its presence here, now, is not an accident. The universe does not hand us coincidences so neatly wrapped. Something about this moment, this encounter beside Mars, feels staged, as though the cosmos itself has chosen to pull back the curtain and show us that we are part of something much larger, something far older, something we cannot yet comprehend. And if 3I Atlas carries with it a story billions of years in the making, then we are only at the prologue. The real chapters, the meaning of its chemistry, the reason for its maneuver, the message it might hold are still waiting to be uncovered. Stay with me, because in part 5, we'll explore the terrifying what-if scenarios. Not just what 3I Atlas is, but what would happen if it changed course again this time, not past Mars, but toward Earth. The question no one wanted to ask in public, but everyone whispered in private, was simple. What if 3I Atlas changes course again? It had already done the unthinkable beside Mars. It had already shown us that predictions were fragile, that models could be broken. If it could alter its path once, what would stop it from doing so again, this time with Earth in its sights? The first thing to understand is scale. At roughly 5 kilometers across, 3I Atlas is no small rock. It's a mountain adrift in space, a mass so immense that if it were to strike Earth, the energy released would dwarf anything in recorded history. The Chicxulub impactor, the asteroid that wiped out the dinosaurs 65 million years ago, was about the same size. That collision carved out a crater more than 180 kilometers wide, sent tsunamis roaring across ancient seas, and filled the atmosphere with dust and fire that choked life for decades. If 3I Atlas were to collide with Earth, we would not be talking about a regional catastrophe. We would be talking about the end of civilization, perhaps the end of humanity itself. Impact simulations run quietly by planetary defense teams paint a grim picture. Even at a grazing angle, even if it did not strike head-on, 3I Atlas would unleash the energy equivalent of billions of nuclear bombs. Entire continents could be leveled. Atmospheric shockwaves would ignite forests, melt infrastructure, and plunge global temperatures into a nuclear winter that could last for years. Crops would fail. Ecosystems would collapse. Humanity, if it survived at all, would be reduced to scattered pockets clinging to existence in a ruined world. And yet, the most terrifying part isn't just the energy of impact. It's the behavior of the object itself. A natural asteroid or comet follows the rules. It can be tracked, predicted, and, in theory, deflected. But 3I Atlas had already broken those rules. It had already shifted when it shouldn't have. If it is under control, or if its chemistry hides processes we don't understand, then its future path is unknowable. How do you defend against something that doesn't play by the physics we've built our defenses upon? Imagine the scenario. Astronomers wake up to new data. The green comet has altered its trajectory again. Ever so slightly, but enough to place Earth in the crosshairs. Panic erupts, in observatories. Models run hot, screens flashing red with probabilities that climb higher by the hour. At first, there is denial. Governments issue calm statements, insisting that the chances of impact are low, that recalculations are needed. But behind closed doors, military satellites begin to track, and defense agencies dust off protocols written for the unthinkable. The public, once enthralled by the beauty of a glowing visitor in the sky, begins to realize that the same emerald shimmer now carries the shadow of extinction. Night after night, the object grows brighter. Its tail stretches across the heavens, not as a wonder, but as a countdown. Religious groups call it a sign. Scientists call it a threat. Ordinary people call it the end. If such a moment were to come, what could we do? The current arsenal of planetary defense tools is limited. Concepts like kinetic impact, a slamming spacecraft into an asteroid to nudge its orbit require years of preparation and advance warning. Nuclear devices, the desperate last resort, remain untested on objects of this scale and composition. And none of these methods would matter if the target wasn't passive rock, but something that could steer. If 3I Atlas was natural, our best hope would be to deflect it with massive, coordinated effort. If it was artificial, no weapon we possess could guarantee success. Consider, too, the symbolism of Mars. If the maneuver beside the red planet was intentional, it may not have been random at all. It may have been a message, a demonstration, a subtle way of saying, we can approach your neighbor world, alter course, show you our hand without touching you directly. If that's true, then the possibility of turning toward Earth isn't just hypothetical. It's a card that could be played at any moment. Disaster scenarios grow darker the more you play them out. Picture the impact zone. If 3I Atlas were to strike an ocean, the tsunamis would dwarf anything humanity has ever seen. Waves hundreds of meters high would smash into coastlines across the globe, wiping entire nations from the map in hours. If it struck land, the firestorms would roll outward for thousands of kilometers, consuming everything. The shockwave alone could flatten cities halfway across a continent, and the dustic, choking dust would spread across the sky, blotting out the sun for years. Life would not vanish completely. Some species would endure, as they always do, but civilization as we know it would not. The networks we depend on, the fragile systems of agriculture, trade, energy, and communication all would collapse. Humanity would enter a new dark age, if it survived at all. And yet, even this picture may underestimate the threat. Because if 3I Atlas is not just a comet, then its potential is far more terrifying than impact alone. What if it carries more than chemistry? What if it carries intention? An artificial probe, disguised as natural debris, could hold technologies we cannot predict. Radiation emissions, exotic materials, even payloads designed for purposes we cannot imagine. An impact might not just be a cosmic accident, could be a weapon. For planetary defense experts, these are not idle fears. Though never stated publicly, documents circulate quietly that explore not only how to respond to an incoming asteroid, but how to respond to the possibility of an incoming probe. How do you communicate with something that may not want to talk? How do you defend against something whose motives are unknown? No answer is ever satisfactory. The thought that gnaws at everyone, from astronomers to generals, is that we may already be too late. If 3I Atlas wanted to strike Earth, perhaps it already would have. The fact that it hasn't, that it chose Mars, instead suggests something else is at play. Maybe it's watching. Maybe it's waiting. Or maybe it's simply indifferent, a relic drifting on a path that only appears deliberate to our fearful eyes. But indifference doesn't make it safe. A wandering giant doesn't need intent to destroy. A single shift, a fraction of a degree, could be enough to change everything. The terrifying reality is that no one can say with certainty what will happen next. We are watching a visitor from another star, an object older than our species, carrying secrets written in chemistry we don't understand, performing maneuvers we can't explain. And it's still here, still moving through our solar system, still within reach. Whether it drifts past us into the dark or turns its gaze toward Earth remains the most pressing question of our time. Stay with me, because in Part 6, we will look at humanity's response, the secret preparations, the plans for planetary defense, and the desperate strategies that may be all that stand between us and annihilation if 3I Atlas ever decides to make its terrifying move toward Earth. The moment 3I Atlas shifted course beside Mars, something changed on Earth. The public saw a curious news story about a glowing green comet. Scientists saw an anomaly to puzzle over, another strange data point to test theories against. But behind the curtain, in the quiet rooms where defense agencies watch the skies, the mood turned cold. Because for them, 3I Atlas was not just a visitor. It was a potential threat. And when threats come from the stars, humanity's options are limited. Planetary defense has always been a fragile shield. For decades, astronomers warned that Earth lives in a shooting gallery, surrounded by millions of asteroids and comets, any one of which could deliver catastrophe if it crossed our path. In recent years, those warnings became reality when small objects like Chelyabinsk entered our atmosphere, exploding with the force of nuclear weapons, reminding us just how vulnerable we really are. That's why programs like NASA's Planetary Defense Coordination Office exist. Their mission is to track, predict, and, if possible, prepare. But prepare how? Against what? Against a 5-kilometer object from another star that has already broken the rules. That's another matter entirely. Officially, humanity's first line of defense is detection. We scan the skies, catalog objects, calculate their orbits, and identify threats decades in advance, if possible. For most asteroids, this works. But 3I Atlas appeared suddenly, a faint blur on wide-field surveys, already moving too fast, already slipping through. And while it should have been predictable once mapped, it betrayed that expectation by altering its path near Mars. That single maneuver shattered the illusion that we could rely on forecasts. The unspoken truth is that detection only helps if the object follows the rules. If detection fails, the next option is deflection. Concepts tested in missions like NASA's DART spacecraft show that, in theory, we can nudge an asteroid by slamming into it with enough mass at high velocity. A small push, applied years in advance, can shift an object's orbit just enough to save Earth. But 3I Atlas is not small. It is massive, ancient, alien in composition. Even if it were natural, the sheer scale of force required to alter its path would be staggering. And if it isn't natural, if it has controlled and deflection, is meaningless. You can't shove what can steer itself. That's where the darker strategies come in, the ones almost no one admits aloud. Nuclear devices. The last resort. Not precision strikes or elegant nudges, but brute force detonations. Massive explosions meant to break an object apart or vaporize enough material to shift its course. In theory, nuclear options could work on smaller bodies. But on something the size of 3I Atlas, success is uncertain. The explosion might fragment it, creating not one impactor, but many. Worse still, if it is hollow, or if its chemistry is as exotic as the spectra suggest, the result could be unpredictable. No one wants to test that gamble when the stakes are nothing less than survival. And yet, even these desperate ideas assume that 3I Atlas is nothing more than rock and ice. What if it isn't? What if the maneuver beside Mars wasn't an accident of physics, but a demonstration of capability? In that case, the problem isn't just planetary defense, it's contact. And our entire arsenal, from kinetic impactors to nuclear warheads, would be like pebbles thrown at a fortress. This is the conversation happening behind closed doors. In classified rooms, where generals sit beside astronomers, where intelligence officers ask questions no telescope can answer. Is 3I Atlas watching us? Is it listening? Should we try to communicate? Or would contact only reveal more about us than we're ready to give away? Silence, for now, has been the chosen policy. Officially, no attempts at messaging are made. Unofficially, there are rumors of signals broadcast quietly toward the green comet. Short bursts of encoded data sent from deep space antennas, testing whether anything responds. If anything did, those results are not public. Meanwhile, governments prepare for the worst in ways they do not advertise. Military satellites shift orbits, tracking the visitor with instruments never meant for astronomy. Submarines are placed on quiet alert, their communications sealed. Emergency response agencies draft scenarios with words they never want to say aloud. Mass evacuation, food rationing, collapse management. Financial markets remain blissfully unaware, but in certain circles of power, contingency plans are drawn like blueprints for a storm no one can stop. The most frightening realization is that humanity is not ready. We like to imagine ourselves as conquerors of nature, builders of machines that can stand against any force. But when confronted with a 5-kilometer object from another star, all of that confidence fades. We are small. Our weapons are crude. Our defenses are thin. And if 3I Atlas ever turned toward Earth, all of our strategies would amount to little more than hope. Yet there is another side to this, a quieter, stranger possibility that some find more unsettling than destruction. What if 3I Atlas doesn't strike? What if it lingers, observing? What if its move beside Mars was not a threat but a test, a way of saying, "We see you"? If that's the case, then humanity's response is not about weapons or shields. It's about choices. Do we reach out? Do we announce ourselves? Do we hide, pretending ignorance in the hope that it drifts away? Each choice carries risks, and none guarantees safety, as the comet drifts farther from Mars. Brighter in our skies, the debate intensifies. Scientists call for transparency, for international collaboration. Defense agencies call for secrecy, for silence, for preparing quietly in the background. Ordinary people, catching sight of its emerald glow, call for answers. But answers are scarce. The truth is that no one knows what 3I Atlas is, what it wants, or what it will do. And so humanity waits, staring upward, caught between awe and fear, between curiosity and survival. Stay with me, because in part 7, we will turn our gaze back to history, exploring whether this is the first time such a visitor has come, or whether ancient civilizations on Earth may have seen objects like 3I Atlas before. Recorded in myths, etched into stone, warnings from the past that we are only now beginning to understand. For weeks the debates circled in scientific halls and defense chambers. But outside those walls, another idea began to take root, an idea older than equations, older than telescopes, older even than science itself. Because while astronomers insisted that 3I Atlas was only the third interstellar object ever observed by humanity, the truth may be more complicated. What if others had come before? What if ancient civilizations, long before our telescopes, had witnessed the same haunting glow of an alien visitor and left their records in the only way they could, in myths, in carvings, in stories passed down across generations until the original truth was buried in legend? Throughout human history, the skies have always been a canvas of wonder and fear. Comets in particular have been messengers of doom, symbols of change, omens etched into the memory of entire cultures. The Babylonians saw them as warnings from the gods. The Chinese kept meticulous records, describing tales that stretched across the heavens like swords. In Europe, comets were feared as heralds of plague and war. But what if not all of those comets were local? What if one or two of them were like 3I Atlas wanderers from beyond, their chemistry alien, their trajectories unbound? The first clue lies in the descriptions. Ancient texts often speak of comets that glowed green, comets so bright that they rivaled the moon. Most natural comets display pale whites and blues, the glow of water vapor and cyanogen under solar radiation. Green is rare, reserved for molecules like diatomic carbon fluorescing under ultraviolet light. And yet, stories from the Aztecs, from India, from Mesopotamia all describe emerald apparitions in the sky, burning with unnatural hues. Could these have been earlier interstellar visitors, their alien chemistry lighting the heavens, just as 3I Atlas does now? Consider too the patterns of fear. When Halley's comet appeared in 1066, it was woven into the Bayeux tapestry, interpreted as a sign of coming conquest. When an unusually bright green comet passed in 164 BC, the Chinese linked it to the fall of dynasties. Each time, the appearance of a stranger in the sky coincided with upheaval on Earth. Were these coincidences, or were ancient observers more perceptive than we give them credit for? Perhaps they sensed, in ways science now confirms, that visitors like 3I Atlas are not ordinary, that they arrive as harbingers of change. Archaeologists have also uncovered carvings in cave art that depict strange celestial events. In Chaco Canyon, spirals and comet-like shapes adorn the rocks, possibly recording a supernova or an unusually bright visitor. In Norse sagas, fiery serpents are described as streaking across the heavens before great battles. In Aboriginal lore, stories speak of sky wanderers that came and went, leaving devastation in their wake. Were these purely symbolic, or were they the echoes of real events, cosmic visitors from other stars, passing silently above civilizations that could only watch in awe and terror? Some researchers go further, tracing myths of gods descending from the heavens to strange green stars that appeared suddenly and then vanished. In Mesoamerican mythology, Quetzalcoatl is described as a bright star serpent whose coming and going reshaped history. In Sumerian texts, Enlil is linked with omens in the sky that glowed with unnatural fire. Skeptics dismiss these as metaphor, but what if they were rooted in observation? What if 3I Atlas is not the first interstellar traveler to brush past Mars and Earth, but only the first we've caught with instruments sharp enough to measure its strangeness? If that's true, then our ancestors may have already seen what we're seeing now. They may have stared at the same emerald glow, felt the same dread, and woven it into myth to warn those who came after. The tragedy is that the warning was forgotten. Science rose, legends fell into stories, and the memory of alien wanderers faded into folklore. Only now, as 3I Atlas burns across our skies, do we remember that maybe our ancestors weren't just telling stories. Maybe they were recording history. Of course, most of the scientific community rejects these connections. They insist that the comets of history were local, that Halley and others account for the myths. And perhaps they are right. But the coincidence is unsettling. If even one of those tales described a visitor like 3I Atlas, then humanity has been here before. We've seen this, and each time it came with upheaval, which raises another question. If our ancestors did witness earlier visitors, what happened after? Did they pass harmlessly, leaving only stories? Or did they bring more changes so deep and violent that only fragments of memory survived? Some catastrophists argue that ancient floods, sudden climate shifts, even collapses of early civilizations may have been linked to impacts or close passes by interstellar debris. Perhaps not 3I Atlas itself, but something like it, older cousins that came before. If so, then history is not just echoing, it is warning. And then there are the darker interpretations, the ones whispered in conspiracy forums and fringe papers. The idea that ancient gods were not gods at all, but travelers, messengers, or machines. That comets glowing green were not random wanderers, but vessels, arriving to watch or to shape human destiny. In that narrative, 3I Atlas isn't just another comet. It's the return of something our ancestors knew long ago and feared enough to encode in story. A cycle repeating. A visitor coming back to see what became of the species that once looked up and trembled. Whether you believe those myths or not, the resonance is undeniable. Humanity has always feared comets, always sensed in them a power beyond chance. And now, faced with 3I Atlas and its impossible chemistry, its maneuver beside Mars, and its ghostly green glow, we are confronted with the possibility that our ancestors were right to fear. Stay with me, because in part 8, we'll leave the myths and return to the present, where the chemistry, the trajectory, and the whispers of control converge into a single terrifying question. If 3I Atlas is not alone, how many others are already on their way? For weeks, all eyes remained fixed on 3I Atlas, as though its green glow in the sky was the only mystery demanding our attention. But as the data mounted, a darker realization began to spread among those tracking its every move. What if 3I Atlas was not unique? What if the Emerald Visitor was not a solitary wanderer, but only the first in a line of travelers, a vanguard in a stream of interstellar debris, or, worse, a fleet of messengers, each carrying secrets from beyond the stars? It's easy to imagine space as empty, a void sparsely populated by a few stars and fewer planets. But reality is different. Between the stars drifts an ocean of fragment-shattered worlds, frozen comets, ancient debris ejected from systems long dead. Astronomers estimate that for every star in the galaxy, billions of small bodies wander the interstellar medium. Most never come close enough to be seen. But occasionally, by luck or by design, one crosses our path. Oumuamua was the first we caught, Borisov the second, and now 3I Atlas the third. 3 in less than a decade, after billions of years without detection. To some, that is chance. To others, it is a pattern. Because if 3 have already come, how many more are still inbound? The surveys don't lie. Wide-field telescopes comb the skies every night, and with each passing year, their sensitivity grows sharper. The rate of discovery is climbing, not because the objects are suddenly more numerous, but because our eyes are finally strong enough to catch them, which means that for all of human history, interstellar visitors may have slipped past unnoticed, drifting silently through our skies. Their strange chemistries and impossible trajectories hidden in plain sight. 3I Atlas is simply the first to stay long enough, glow bright enough, and behave strangely enough to spark terror. And here is the unsettling truth. Whispers already suggest it is not alone. In the weeks after its maneuver beside Mars, faint anomalies appeared in survey data. Small smudges of light, inconsistent tracks, objects that seemed to move just a little too fast, at angles that didn't quite match local debris. Most of these were dismissed as noise, but a few stubborn points refused to vanish. Were they fragments shed from 3I Atlas's own body? Or were they separate travelers, weaker, dimmer, trailing behind it like shadows? If they are fragments, then the implications are grave enough. A comet that fractures can unleash multiple bodies, each carrying its own destructive potential. But if they are separate, if 3I Atlas belongs to a cluster of interstellar objects entering the solar system together, then we are not watching a singular event, but the opening act of something much larger. Imagine that for a moment. 3I Atlas is not one messenger, but part of a stream, a chain of ancient fragments scattered across light years. If that's true, then our solar system may be intersecting with a corridor of debris thrown outward by some catastrophic event billions of years ago. A planetary collision, a shattered star system, a civilization sending probes into the dark. If this is the case, then more will come, not just in decades, but perhaps in years, months, even weeks. And there is another possibility, one far more chilling. What if 3I Atlas was not drifting at random, but leading? What if the maneuver beside Mars was not only a test of control, but a signal? A way of broadcasting across the void, a beacon announcing, "I am here." If so, then the real danger may not be the green comet itself, but whatever responds to it. Scientists remain cautious. Official statements continue to insist that no evidence exists for companions or signals. But behind the curtain, new observation campaigns have been launched. Deep sky surveys are pointed in unusual directions, combing not just for 3I Atlas, but for anything moving with it. The silence from those programs is telling. Silence often speaks louder than alarm. For the public, the thought that 3I Atlas is not alone is both fascinating and horrifying. If there are others, then we are at the beginning of a new era in which interstellar visitors are not rare curiosities, but constant reminders that our solar system is open, exposed, and vulnerable. For the scientific community, the implications are staggering. If these objects are natural, then the galaxy is far more dynamic than we imagined. Its debris flowing into our neighborhood in streams. If they are not natural, if they are probes, then humanity is already surrounded. We are not being visited. We are being studied. Consider what it would mean if multiple interstellar objects entered our solar system within a short span. One alone might be dismissed as chance. 2, perhaps coincidence. 3, a pattern. But a cluster. That would demand explanation. And if that cluster appeared not at the edge of the solar system, but near Mars, near Earth, within sight of our growing civilization, then the coincidence would be too sharp to ignore. It would mean intent. Astronomers already fear what their instruments may reveal. The James Webb Telescope, trained on 3I Atlas, has collected reams of spectral data. But in those spectra are anomalies, yet unexplained anomalies, that some suspect may point to companions hidden in the tail. Faint bodies cloaked in dust and gas. If one of those bodies were to detach and reveal itself, the narrative would shift overnight from a strange comet to a caravan. The terrifying truth is that the cosmos does not send invitations. It does not knock politely on the door. If 3i Atlas is not alone, then the visitors are already inside the house. And we are only just realizing that the knock we heard was not the first, but the latest in a line of arrivals we failed to notice until now. The silence from official voices grows heavier with each passing week. Questions mount. Are there others behind it? Are they smaller? Are they already here? And if so, why is no one saying so? Perhaps because the answer is too unsettling. Because if the public understood that we may not be facing one alien visitor but many, the fragile order of our world would crumble. Stay with me, because in part 9 we will examine the most controversial possibility of all, that 3i Atlas is not just a visitor, not just a probe, but part of something far larger, deliberate network of objects seeded across the galaxy. A web of silent machines older than our civilization, waiting, watching, and perhaps finally ready to make their move. As humanity struggled to explain the impossible maneuver beside Mars, as telescopes dissected the alien chemistry and survey teams whispered about faint anomalies trailing behind, another idea began to surface, an idea so audacious, so terrifying, that few dared to voice it aloud. What if 3i Atlas is not a solitary wanderer at all? What if it is a single node in a network, an ancient web of interstellar machines seeded across the galaxy, each one waiting for its moment, each one carrying out a mission older than our species itself? It is not an unfamiliar idea. Science fiction has played with it for decades. Bracewell probes autonomous messengers sent by advanced civilizations to explore and communicate. Von Neumann machines self-replicating scouts capable of spreading endlessly, building copies of themselves from raw material as they traverse the stars. For most, these concepts remain speculation. But for those who have studied the cold silence of the universe, they are not fantasy. They are inevitability. If intelligent life arises and spreads, then the most efficient way to explore a galaxy is not with fragile biological travelers, but with machines. Machines that can last. Machines that can wait. Imagine that 3i Atlas is one such machine. It arrives in our solar system not by accident, but by design. Its comet-like body is camouflage, its green glow a mask of chemistry that hides its true nature. It drifts close to Mars, executes a maneuver that should be impossible, and in that moment reveals itself not as debris but as a participant, a single node doing what it was built to do, but built by whom and when? If the network theory is correct, then 3i Atlas may not be the first to visit us. It may not even be the first we have seen. Oumuamua, with its strange acceleration, its cigar-like shape, and its refusal to behave like a normal comet. Borisov, with its hyperbolic trajectory, slipping past almost unnoticed. Perhaps each was a node, drifting silently through our skies, performing its task before moving on. Perhaps dozens have passed before, hidden by the limits of our technology. Perhaps they have been here longer than we know. Watching, the unsettling part of this theory is not just that machines might exist, but that they might be coordinated. A single object drifting into a solar system is remarkable. A stream of them, arriving over decades, begins to look like a pattern. A pattern begins to look like intention. An intention demands motive. Why would an ancient civilization scatter such probes across the stars? To explore, to observe, to signal, or to seed. Consider the possibility of communication. In 1960, astronomer Ronald Bracewell proposed that advanced civilizations might send autonomous probes instead of radio signals. Unlike light, which fades and takes years to travel, probes can wait, listen, and interact directly when a civilization becomes advanced enough to notice. If 3I Atlas is one of these, then its maneuver beside Mars may have been its way of saying, I am not passive. I am here, I am ready, but there is another, darker possibility. The von Neumann scenario. Machines that do not simply explore, but replicate, using asteroids and comets as raw material. Over millions of years, they could spread across the entire galaxy, each one silent, each one waiting for conditions to trigger their purpose. If that is the case, then 3I Atlas may not just be a probe. It may be a seed, a carrier of instructions or mechanisms designed to activate at the right time. A machine older than our sun, still carrying out orders long after its creators have vanished. The eerie part is how well the network idea fits the evidence. The alien chemistry, the lack of iron, the dominance of carbon dioxide, perhaps not natural oddities, but deliberate engineering. The maneuver beside Mars perhaps not chance but demonstration. The pulsing green gloper, perhaps not random outbursts but modulation. A coded signal waiting for someone advanced enough to decode it, and the possibility of faint companions trailing behind. Perhaps not fragments, but siblings. Part of a cluster designed to enter together. If so, then Earth is not being visited by a comet. It is being inducted into a network that spans light, a web of watchers that has already linked countless stars, countless civilizations, countless species across the galaxy. And we, in our arrogance, believed we were alone. For many, this idea is too much to bear. The silence of the cosmos has long been our shield. The Fermi paradox, the question of why no one else has spoken, comforted us with the illusion that maybe no one else was out there. But 3I Atlas tears down that illusion. It whispers that others have spoken, just not in ways we expected. Not with radio, not with light, but with machines, with ancient messengers disguised as comets, patient enough to wait billions of years until we were ready to see them. And here is the most chilling thought of all. If there is a network, then 3I Atlas is not acting alone. Somewhere out there, beyond our telescopes, others are listening. Others are watching. When it passed Mars, when it shifted course, when its chemistry flared in pulses, maybe it was not showing us anything at all. Maybe it was showing them, sending confirmation, intelligence detected, civilization found, target locked. The galaxy may already know we are here, and 3I Atlas may be the messenger that told it. Stay with me, because in part 10, we will confront the question no one dares ask. If this is a network, if 3I Atlas has already broadcast our existence, what happens next? Do we wait for contact, or do we prepare for something far more terrifying an arrival? If 3I Atlas is a messenger, then the question that hangs over us is simple and terrifying. What happens now? What happens after the maneuver beside Mars, after the pulsing green glow, after the data is gathered and the signals F, they are signals F sent? If the object is part of a network, then it may already have done what it came to do. It may already have broadcast our existence across the void. And if so, then humanity is no longer anonymous. We are seen. The idea of being noticed sounds innocent enough, almost comforting. But in cosmic terms, being noticed is the most dangerous state of all. Civilizations rise and fall across the galaxy, and not all are friendly. To be visible is to be vulnerable. If 3i Atlas has announced us, then somewhere out there, perhaps light years away, something knows we exist. Something may already be deciding what to do about us. In the best case, contact would mean communication, a signal perhaps buried in the pulses of the green coma, waiting for us to decode. Instructions, warnings, or greetings carried in patterns subtle enough that only a technological species could unravel them. But contact is not always friendly. If history has taught us anything, it is that first encounters between civilizations rarely favor the weaker side. And in this story, we are the weaker side. Imagine the scenarios. One possibility is that nothing happens for years. Decades pass, and 3i Atlas drifts silently away, vanishing into the black. Humanity breathes a sigh of relief, convinced it was just a rock after all. But unseen, far away, the message has already been received. A probe, a ship, or something stranger is launched in response. We may not know until centuries later, when another visitor arrives, this time not disguised, this time not silent. Another possibility is more immediate. 3i Atlas may not need to wait for reinforcements. It may already carry within it the tools for contact. Its maneuver beside Mars may have been a test, a demonstration. Its next move could be toward Earth, not to strike, but to orbit, to linger, to study us more closely. Perhaps to deploy something smaller, invisible to our telescopes. Something that slips quietly into our orbit and begins its work. If we were in its position, we would do the same: send drones, listen for signals, analyze the planet before deciding whether to reveal ourselves. And then there is the darkest possibility. That contact is not communication, not observation, but conquest. To us, the galaxy feels vast, safe in its emptiness. But to a civilization accustomed to spanning light years, planets like Earth are resources. Water, carbon, metals, all precious, all abundant here. If 3i Atlas is a scout, then it may be the first step in resource acquisition. To civilizations that survive for billions of years, morality may not resemble anything we know. To them, we may not be partners. We may be fuel, of course. Some scientists argue for restraint. They point out that assuming hostility is a projection of our own fears, not evidence. They remind us that if a civilization can build probes that survive for millions of years, it would already know how to find planets like Earth. It would have no need to trick us. If 3i Atlas is a network node, then perhaps its goal is not conquest, but curiosity. To learn, to share, to connect. The dreamers among us cling to this hope. But dreams do little to calm the unease that spreads when the unknown hangs overhead in green fire. Governments face a dilemma. Do we prepare for war against something we cannot fight, or do we prepare for peace with something we cannot understand? Silence has been the policy so far, but silence cannot last forever. If 3i Atlas begins to linger, if its signals grow clearer, if its companions reveal themselves, then a choice must be made. Do we reach out? Do we speak? Or do we remain quiet, hoping that ignorance will protect us? History offers no guide. When civilizations meet on Earth, silence never works. Contact always changes both sides, usually in ways the weaker cannot control. For the first time, humanity may find itself living that story on a cosmic scale. A young species, standing on the edge of its first interplanetary steps, noticed by something far older, far greater, perhaps far colder. The nightmare scenario is not just that 3i Atlas is a probe, but that it is not alone. If it is broadcast, then what answers? Do they come in years? In centuries? In seconds, traveling faster than we imagine possible? And when they come, will we even recognize them as life? To us, life means biology, flesh, and blood. But to an ancient civilization, life may mean machines, patterns, consciousness etched into matter itself. Contact may not come as voices. It may come as algorithms, as instructions, as control. And here lies the cruelest irony. For all our fears of invasion, of conquest, of destruction, the greatest danger may be assimilation. Not fire from the sky, but quiet whispers in our machines. Signals slipping into our networks, guiding us slowly, invisibly, until we are no longer ourselves. If 3i Atlas is a messenger, perhaps it does not need to strike. Perhaps it only needs to speak in a language we cannot resist. What happens next? That is the question governments cannot answer. Scientists cannot answer. No one can answer. The only certainty is that the maneuver beside Mars was not the end. It was the beginning. The story of 3i Atlas is not just about a comet. It is about us, about whether we are ready to be seen, about whether our first step into the cosmic community will be one of survival or one of surrender. Stay with me, because in part 11 we will look inward at the human heart. Beyond the science and the strategy lies a deeper question. How does humanity itself respond to the unknown? Will we unite in the face of a visitor like 3i Atlas? Or will we fracture, turning fear into chaos, and sealing our fate before the cosmos even decides it for us? When 3i Atlas made its subtle move beside Mars, it was not just a shift in trajectory. It was a shift in us. For scientists, it shattered equations. For defense agencies, it stirred alarms. But for humanity as a whole, it became something deeper, a mirror showing us who we really are when confronted with the unknown. For most people, the story of 3i Atlas began the way all cosmic stories begin, as a headline, a curiosity, a glowing comet from another star, a strange emerald visitor lighting up the night sky. People stepped out of their homes and craned their necks to see it. Phones captured shaky footage. Social feeds filled with awe. But awe never lasts. Awe always gives way to questions, and questions give way to fear. And fear, when it spreads across billions, takes many shapes. Religions moved first. Some called 3i Atlas a sign from the divine, a messenger of judgment or redemption. Preachers filled pulpits with sermons tying the emerald glow to ancient prophecies, to revelations, to the return of God's long-promised. Pilgrimages began, people traveling to deserts and mountaintops to gaze at the green light and wait for meaning. Others rejected fear and embraced hope, declaring it proof of higher intelligence, of a cosmic family that had finally revealed itself. Faith swelled, fractured, and reformed in the shape of the comet. Governments, meanwhile, struggled with secrecy. At first they downplayed the anomaly beside Mars, dismissing it as outgassing, as random chance. But in a world where data flows faster than official statements, silence only fed suspicion. Amateur astronomers posted raw coordinates online. Independent scientists dissected spectra in public threads. The story escaped control, and when governments refused to clarify, conspiracy took its place. Some believed 3I Atlas was an alien ship. Others swore it was a weapon built by rival nations. Trust eroded, and with it, the fragile fabric of cooperation. Markets reacted next. Fear of the unknown translates easily into fear of tomorrow. Stocks dipped, currencies wavered. Energy companies saw sudden surges in demand as people began hoarding resources. Cryptocurrencies spiked, driven by paranoia that traditional systems might collapse. Every green shimmer in the sky added weight to economies already stretched thin. And then there was the public, the billions staring upward. For some, 3I Atlas became an obsession. Online communities formed overnight, tracking its every move, speculating endlessly, weaving narratives of salvation or doom. For others, it was a shadow over daily life, an anxiety they could not name, a pressure they could not escape. Psychologists began reporting spikes in sleep disorders, in apocalyptic dreams, in patients confessing a gnawing fear that nothing mattered anymore. Children asked if the comet would hit. Parents lied because the truth that no one knew was worse. But perhaps the most dangerous reaction was division. Instead of uniting under the possibility of an external threat, humanity fractured. Nations accused one another of hiding data. Groups accused governments of lying. Believers clashed with skeptics. Hope clashed with despair. Science clashed with faith. The green visitor became a fault line, splitting humanity not along borders, but along belief. For every call to prepare, there was a call to surrender. For every voice demanding unity, another demanded isolation. History warns us of this pattern. In times of crisis, we rarely stand together. Disasters amplify distrust, turning neighbor against neighbor, nation against nation. And here was no ordinary disaster, no earthquake or storm. Here was something alien, something vast, something we could not control. The result was inevitable. Chaos, and yet hidden beneath the fractures, another current began to flow. Quiet, fragile, but real. For some, 3I Atlas became a reason to look past differences. If humanity was being watched, if we were truly not alone, then what sense did it make to fight one another? What sense did borders have in the face of the infinite? A few leaders spoke of unity, of preparing not as nations but as a species. Scientists call for international cooperation, for shared data, for a planetary response. Artists painted, musicians composed, writers filled pages with visions of a humanity finally forced to grow beyond itself. For the first time in history, the entire world looked at the same object in the sky, and for some, that shared gaze was enough to spark hope. Hope and fear wrestled, each fed by the same green light. Which one will win? That depends on us. 3I Atlas is more than an interstellar object. It is a test of whether we can rise together or fall apart, whether we can face the unknown as one or collapse under the weight of our own divisions. It is a mirror, and what it shows is not comforting. It shows that we are fragile, that we are quick to fracture, but it also shows that we are capable of awe, of wonder, of unity. If only we choose it, the comet will not decide our fate. We will stay with me, because in part 12, we will face the end of this journey, the final chapter. What does 3I Atlas truly mean for humanity? Whether natural or artificial, chance or design, its presence beside Mars has already changed us forever. And its legacy may be not in what it is, but in what it forces us to become. The story of 3I Atlas began as a blur in the sky, a faint traveler glimpsed by surveyed telescopes. It became a mystery when its orbit betrayed its interstellar origin. It became a warning when its chemistry defied everything we thought we knew. And it became a terror when it shifted beside Mars, performing a maneuver no comet should ever make. But in the end, 3I Atlas is not just an object in the heavens. It is a question so vast that no calculation, no telescope, no theory can answer it fully. Perhaps it is natural, a shard of some ancient world, flung into the void by a collision billions of years ago, drifting aimlessly until chance carried it to our solar system. If so, then it tells us that the galaxy is richer, stranger, and more dangerous than we ever imagined. That for every star, countless fragments wander, carrying chemistries and histories alien to our own. That life itself may be seeded by such visitors, bringing molecules from distant nurseries to worlds like ours. If 3I Atlas is natural, then it is a reminder of our fragility, of the cosmic lottery that governs existence. Or perhaps it is not natural. Perhaps its maneuver beside Mars was not chance, but choice, its chemistry not accident, but design. Perhaps 3I Atlas is a machine, a probe, a messenger sent by a civilization long gone or still waiting. If so, then it tells us we are not alone, that we never were, that the silence of the stars was not emptiness but patience, waiting until we were ready to notice, that the green glow in our skies is not just light, but a signal, a statement, we see you. If 3I Atlas is artificial, then it is a mirror of our future, proof that civilizations can reach across light years, endure for eons, and leave their mark long after their worlds have faded. In both cases, the meaning is the same. 3I Atlas forces us to confront ourselves. It shows us that the universe is not ours alone, that our world is fragile, that our species is young, and that our choices matter. It asks whether we will face the unknown with unity or with fear, whether we will rise together or collapse apart. It asks whether we are ready for the moment when the sky itself becomes a messenger. Already its legacy is written in us. For some, it has rekindled awe, the childlike wonder of staring at the stars and imagining what lies beyond. For others, it has ignited fear, the dread that something vast and indifferent or worse, vast and intentional is watching. For governments, it has sparked secrecy, preparation, the quiet drafting of plans against the impossible. For religions, it has become a sign, a symbol, a prophecy. For artists, it has become a muse. And for humanity as a whole, it has become a test. We do not yet know where 3I Atlas will go from here. Perhaps it will drift harmlessly past, fading into the black, its secrets unsolved, its meaning debated for centuries. Perhaps it will linger, its glow a reminder that something alien passed through our skies and left us changed. Or perhaps it will return, not as a comet, but as a message, or as a fleet, or as something we cannot yet imagine. But even if 3I Atlas disappears tomorrow, it has already altered the course of our story. It has shown us that the universe is alive with motion, alive with mystery, alive with possibilities that shake the foundations of our understanding. It has reminded us that we are small, fragile, but also curious, capable of wonder, capable of rising to the challenge of the unknown. The emerald visitor beside Mars will fade, but the questions it leaves behind will not. Questions about origins, about intention, about destiny, questions we cannot ignore, and perhaps that is the true gift of 3i Atlas. Not destruction, not salvation, but perspective. A reminder that we are part of something larger, older, more complex than our brief history has allowed us to imagine. A reminder that our story is not finished, that it is only beginning, and that the next chapter may be written not on earth, but in the stars. Look up, see the green glow. Feel the unease, the awe, the fear. That is the universe speaking. That is the cosmos reminding us that we are not alone, that we never were, that the future is wide and terrifying and beautiful. And remember this, the move beside Mars was not the end. It was the beginning.